So Easy Mo B, that brings us to an interesting point because your relationship with Big D is different to where, say, your relationship was with Big Daddy Kane at the time. So how do you, but you're the same person even though you've grown and developed and evolved yourself, of course, but how do you navigate being a producer and then navigating dealing with different personalities depending on who you're working with, and how do you think that's evolved for you over the years?
It's crazy that you asked that because that plays a serious integral role in the process of recording in the studio. People's personalities really play into the success or not of the record being made, you know? Maybe they might be real stiff, stubborn. Maybe they don't want to take advice. Big D he's open to advice and the things that I suggest. Whereas Big Daddy Kane is like, nah, I ain't changing it. No. Kane is open to stuff too, but it just depends on who you're working with. Every person is a different person, has a different personality that you're working with.
And it's different because I'm like the little brother, he's the big brother. So the little brother gonna always listen to the big brother.
Or at least
you don't always listen to the big brother though. Not always.
But that's the interesting thing that I think made This Is My Life interesting. And when people hear Feel My Pain, I think they'll find the same thing because since you guys both individually and collectively on your music have worked with so many different people, I think Easy Mo B's point is so important because people forget, they just hear music. They don't understand all the work and the pre-production and the writing and the making the beats. Like, it's a process. Cool. And I think that people that are not familiar with it at all just hear the result and just think that's the only way it could have been, or no, it could have been 7,000 different ways on that one song. It could have been made so many different ways. So Big D, for you with This Is My Life, one of the main collaborators or interesting collaborators you had was Kool Keith, and I know you have a huge history with Ultra Magnetic MCs, which we'll get into throughout the interview. But for Kool Keith in particular, because he's so different and so distinctive, what did you see or learn from him over the years that was different from the other people that you were around?
Well, being around, first and foremost, Keith is my cousin, so it was like, he's family, like Mo's family, you know what I mean? So with Keith brought me into the game. He put me down with Ultra in 1988. So I came in, I was the hype man of the group, you know what I mean? And that's when I got real serious with it. Like when he brought me in, and me and Keith, our chemistry in the studio was, okay, you rap like this, that's cool. But when me and you do a record together, if you listen to any songs of me and Keith don't sound the way he sound on any of his solo records. You get what I'm saying? When you hear Keith on a record with me, Keith is on that same tempo I am. He's spitting hard rhymes. He's still in his same element, but he's just more, you know what I mean? More direct with it than when you listen to his stuff, which everybody love him for, is that all over the place, bugged out style.
Well, I think one of the prime examples of that is the Pass That Shit. I thought that one was like a good example of exactly what you're talking about, where he was, of a more standard flow, more standard style,
Yeah. Even when you listen to Frankenstein Mafia, you don't hear Keith rap like that in none of his solo records. You know what I mean? But when you listen to This Is My Life and you listen to that, you're like, oh shit. That
kind of like how I adapt to different artists when I work with them. Same thing.
Yeah, well, Easy Mo B, for now that, thankfully we're all still here and making it happen in 2020, but as somebody that, started at least professionally in the 80s, how adapting on the technology side, since you build your music it sounds like similarly to what you did back in the 80s. How would you say you've advanced or evolved or changed since some things have remained the same for you?
Well, I'll be real honest with you. I'm still hard on that soul, the funk, my basic sound. I don't think I will ever like depart from there. What I am interested in is getting it sonically like clearer. Because we're in a digital age now, and there's all different types of equipment that producers are using out there right now. And I want to sound just as digitally clear as everybody else. Shout to Isla Instruments, who just, they have me and a bunch of other people as beta testers for the new S2400, which is really sort of a replica of the SP1200. And Soren, that totally explains like everything that you're saying, because everything I did on the 1200, I can do the same thing on that machine now, but it's just it'll be sonically and more digital, crystal clear.
Well, speaking of sonically and the clarity of things, one thing I thought was interesting in your work, Xzibit, was for like, say the stuff you did on It's a Big Daddy Thing versus the stuff you did with Craig Mack and Biggie. It sounded a little, to me at least, more muddy, I guess, for lack of a better way to put it, where the Big Daddy Kane sounded brighter, or at least felt that way.
I wanted to say the brighter on the Big Daddy Kane came from, at that time that was my first project. And all of my concept, all of my ideas was being formulated on this I had this little sampler called the Casio SK1. I heard that on Prince Paul, he used one of them or another different model too. So the concept was built on cassette at home. I told you I don't like to make beats in the studio, but when we did that, I took the records to the studio and the engineer programmed everything for me. The reason why it sounded so bright is Another Victory and Call 'Em Mr. Welfare. They were made on the synclavier. Anybody out there that's an equipment buff, they know what the synclavier is. It was this oh man, that it was a keyboard back then that cost I don't know how many tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was real expensive. But we sampled through, it was done on the synclavier. And Biggie's stuff and all of my stuff following that was done on the SP1200 and the Akai rack mount samplers like the S900, 950, stuff like that. And that's a grittier sound.
Absolutely. And I think, and that to me is so interesting because sonically rap, as you guys are well aware, had different, especially on the mixing side of things have evolved and changed dramatically so much. And so much of what I think the three of us love so much is the more muddy, dark, grittier sound. Whereas now things could sound like super duper flawless. So, or nowadays they could be muddy and dirty, but crystal clear, muddy, dirty. So that was my point, or about to be my question with Feel My Pain. How did you, Xzibit, as someone that is so focused on the sonics of things, balance like the old school feel of that versus having all that technology and balancing what you were going to end up doing on the mix side of things, on the feel of it?
Well, special shout to Fred Ones, who was the engineer throughout the total duration of the project. His studio right there in the Bronx, that's where everything was recorded. I literally brought the SP1200 and the Akai S950 into the studio. Tracked the beats, they were dumped into Pro Tools, and from there on, we just EQ'd on the board and mixed and did all the drops. Very simple. Pretty much the same thing that I always did back in the day, except that a lot of times we were on the bigger SSL or a Neve board or something like that. But same process.
Okay. And then for you, Big D, since you've been in the game since the 80s as well, how have you seen your writing evolve from when you were first starting to write in the 80s to Feel My Pain? Like, how have you grown, changed, and evolved as a writer?
You know, it's crazy that you asked that because I just started writing when we did Feel My Pain.
As you mean writing things down?
Yeah.
So
I had never wrote a song down in my natural life, except when I was locked up.
And what made you make that change?
Moby.
And what
Because I was like, yo, you better keep it tight. You better, you know, whatever it takes to make the album and the songs perfect. It'll never be perfect, but great to our satisfaction.
Looking for the perfect.
I'm glad I started writing because when we did This Is My Life, I wrote some incredible records on that double album, such as Too Raw, the song I did with Little Fame and Will Porter, Reach Out. No, matter of fact, I didn't even write Reach Out. I did Reach Out the head.
Wow.
I wrote The Heist. I wrote for Gangster Shit was out the head. Past that, I did that out the head. Can't Talk, I did that off the head. Everything else I wrote for.
Okay. I wanted to make a note. I don't mean to cut in Soren, but also too with the first album, This Is My Life, it was made during the periods of pre and post pandemic. You get what I'm saying? Like the first half or the 3/4 of it was done before the pandemic hit, and then a little bit after, you know, is when it so that was interesting to me too.
And how did that affect the recording?
It didn't.
How did it? It didn't change the shape of the album at all?
Nah, not at all. All it did
I'll tell you what it did do. I'll tell you what it did do for me on Feel the Pain, on the making of this album. He just got me into the studio about a month or so ago. The whole other time, I didn't want to move. I didn't want to come out. Just due to the coronavirus thing and everything, but life goes on. We still got to do what we got to do. We went in the studio with our masks and did our best to perform, you know, practice the social distancing. But you know, brothers, man, they got to, yo, what's up? So, you know, when you first meet up and all of that. I left the studio. I told Big D. And like 2 days after I went and I got tested. And I was fine. You know, but this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about that plays into, you know, the conditions we living in right now. Still trying to.
Yo, what was crazy is he told me the session after that, he said, yo, next session, I want a locked door session. So I said, all right. Yo, I called everybody. I said, yo, man, next session, don't even come, man. Locked door.
I don't like sessions anyway that got a whole lot of people there that don't really belong there. I always believed when I used to book a lot of the sessions, rest in peace, Unique Studios in Times Square, New York City. I did so much in there before. Whenever I would book sessions in there, I would prefer that it was just me, the engineer, and the artist. And there'd be like a couple of other people that come and hang out, but I never liked the overpacked sessions because it plays on the concentration. The artist can't really concentrate. And then I'm trying to be focused, and you got all of these other people. They're more concerned about ordering food. You know what I mean? Rolling this next blunt or whatever. I'm like, yo, go in the lounge, take that out there, because we're trying to be focused here.